Okay. Hello. Hello. How it is with the dog. Back. I finally started listening to underscores. Got around to listening to I think it's called like Fishmonger or something. Fish Market. What's it called? It's like the only thing I've downloaded aside from that 8485 collab. Wall Socket? No, I have Wall Socket downloaded. Yeah, it's alright. In 2023. Pretty timely is what I would say if they weren't, you know, chronically brown or whatever. Some fucking stain on the face of fucking decadence is what they'd probably be labeled as. But, you know, it's probably why it's the best one so far. Mm. Fix the hat. Keep the hoodie on. Take the hoodie off. No, wait, it's cute as fuck. Reach out. Or what is it? Bars. Shout out. Shout out. Bars. Shout out if you're following it. Oh. Alright. Taro pudding isn't too bad. It's not too bad at all. Alright, let's get a little. My utensil. I have my stick. Popped corn chicken. So good. I need a vitamin. I do need. Take the orange pill, you know. It's a lot harder to do with boba. Alright. Anyways. Okay. Let's not dilly-dally, because the last video was 3 hours long, because I took, like, a 30-minute lunch break, and, like, fucking 3 takes on, like, everything at the end there, which will be great when I do the long cut, but maybe not great right now. Paulo. Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire. Paulo. Oh. Not gonna. I can't. How would I even do the second part? I like the milk. I like the milk. There's no caffeine in it. No caffeine in the thing. I'm not so wired today. This is a playful dialogue with myself, Gloria Watkins, talking with bell hooks, my riding voice. I wanted to speak about Paolo and his work in this way, for it afforded me an intimacy, a familiarity I do not find it possible to achieve in the essay. And here I found a way to share the sweetness, the solidarity I talk about. That's fascinating. Isn't that interesting, everyone? Watkins. Oh, someone should do this with me. Yo, is this the whole chapter? I didn't even rehearse. This is kind of what I did with Age of Surveillance, isn't it? Read the damn books. They're better than me. Alright, let's take a look. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh. Okay. Okay, just give me just give me 5 more minutes. How's it going? Everyone feeling good today? For 5 minutes, I want you to do 10 stretches. Okay. Pick any 10 stretches. Just hold it for 30 seconds. Stand up. Get the blood flowing. You know, if it's been a long day, this might be the first time that you've done this today. Okay. Get some circulation going from your feet to your head. You know that what happens when you get older is you sit down, and if you're sitting down long enough, you'll just get fluid buildup in your feet. So just lie on your back if you can. Put your feet above your head. And just hold your hands underneath your shins so that your butt points up, so that you're stretching your nerves, your lower back nerves, so that you're letting fluid flow through your body. Excuse me. Just give me some. I need some time to eat. One sec. If you're done with that, great. If not, you can just listen. Release. If you haven't already, stand up. Take your arms, put them out to either side of your body. I want you to imagine that between, so your arms out, your palms facing forward. I want you to imagine that there's an invisible bar being held between your thumb and your index finger, like right there in the nape of your hand. Is that what it is? Is that the nape, in that space where that flap of skin is between your index finger and your thumb? With your palms facing forward and your arms out, just imagine there's a bar being held there that stretches from one hand to the other. And I want you to move your hands in sync and kind of roll your shoulders while you do this. Put your hands behind your head and then bring your hands over your head and in front of you, as if you're moving this bar in front of you and behind you over your head. Really feel that in your upper back and shoulders. Maybe do like 20 of those. Now, whether or not you're done or you were doing something else, why don't we come back to the computer? Get ready to go through some content. Popcorn chicken was spicy. Think I have this big old thing of milk. All right. She's gonna talk to herself in this chapter. I'm gonna see how well I can listen to what she's saying and understand how she responds to herself. This really is like a call and response kind of thing. Is eye tracking on? Do I need to turn on the eye tracking? It looks like I do. Let's see. Yeah, there we are. And as soon as I turn it on, it starts going crazy. And I am streaming. I'm not recording. Okay. I'm sorry, I have to put this down. It's so good. It's so good. It's like breakfast cereal. Ugh. It's one of those brown sugar milks that they're selling at all the boba places now. And I got it with egg jelly. Alright. This is a playful dialogue with myself, Gloria Watkins, talking with bell hooks, my writing voice. I wanted to speak about Paulo and his work in this way, for it afforded me an intimacy, familiarity I do not find it possible to achieve in the essay. And here I found a way to share the sweetness, the solidarity I talk about. So, it looks like it's always going to be Watkins and Hooks talking. I'll try to make that apparent. Reading your books, Ain't I a Woman, Black Women and Feminism, Feminist Theory from Margin to Center, and Talking Back, it is clear that your development as a critical thinker has been greatly influenced by the work of Paulo Freire. Can you speak about why his work has touched your life so deeply? Years before I met Paulo Freire, I had learned so much from his work, learned new ways of thinking about social reality that were liberatory. Often, when university students and professors read Freire, they approach his work from a voyeuristic standpoint. Whereas they read, they see two locations in the work. The subject position of Freire, the educator, whom they are often more interested in than the ideas or subjects he talks about, and the oppressed, marginalized groups he speaks about. In relation to these two subject positions, they position themselves as observers and outsiders. When I came to Freire's work, just at that moment in my life when I was beginning to question deeply and profoundly the politics of domination, the impact of racism, sexism, class exploitation, and the kind of domestic colonization that takes place in the United States, I felt myself to be deeply identified with the marginalized peasants he talks about, or with my black brothers and sisters, my comrades in Guinea-Bissau. You see, I was coming from a rural southern black experience into the university, and I had lived through the struggle for racial desegregation and was in resistance without having a political language to articulate that process. Paulo was one of the thinkers whose work gave me a language. He made me think deeply about the construction of an identity in resistance. There was this one sentence of Freire's that became a revolutionary mantra for me. We cannot enter the struggle as objects in order later to become subjects. Really, it is difficult to find words adequate to explain how this statement was like a locked door, and I struggled within myself to find the key. And that struggle engaged me, and that struggle engaged me in a process of critical thought that was transformative. This experience positioned Freire in my mind and heart as a challenging teacher whose work furthered my own struggle against the colonizing process, the colonizing mindset. Excuse me. In your work, you indicate an ongoing concern with the process of decolonization, particularly as it affects African Americans living within the white supremacist culture of the United States. Do you see a link between the process of decolonization and Freire's focus on conscientization? Holy fucking shit. Conscientization. How did I pronounce this last time? Conscientization? Conscientization? How does the robot say it? Oh, the robot's gone from us. How does Google say it? Wait, how does Google say it? Help me. I wasn't ready for this. Conscientization. 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 Okay. Conscientization. Conscientization. In your work, you indicate an ongoing concern with the process of decolonization, particularly as it affects African Americans living within the white supremacist culture of the United States. Do you see a link between the process of decolonization and Freire's focus on conscientization? It's important that you understand. So before I go into this, right, like, it's important that you understand why she goes to culture here. So, Bell Hooks was saying that she kind of lived in this experience of being a colonized person in the United States. Living life as someone who is a subject of colonial powers, right? As the colonized. Now, that term doesn't come from just anywhere. It doesn't purely come from imperialism either. Settler colonialism, as we've come to understand it in the 20th century, kind of centers around this, like, post Gilded Age retrospective of the development of a global economy that had happened over, like, the past couple hundred years, based on imperial powers using technology to reach foreign lands, which is one way of looking at it, right? So historically, if you see a major, like, development in technology, so, like, the development of, like, the steam engine or the development of, like, factory processes, right? You see sort of the same thing happening over and over again in history, where the homogenization of goods creates a revolution, an economic revolution in this place or that place or this place or that place, linking it to this global economy, creating these fantastic pleasure cities, and giving people the modern amenities that we understand and enjoy today. And so what you're not understanding is how anyone can succeed being one of these imperial powers, right? You know, you can be at the seat, at the helm this fleet, right? Or you can be like one of these trades, these what is it? These like businessmen in one of these guilds, right? But you don't know what you're doing. You don't really know how you manage. And so understanding that sort of, how would I say this? Like, the public was prepared. It was deemed that the public was ready to understand how these things could happen once a post World War One Germany had become sort of the subject of this European colonial power structure, and then suddenly erupted into becoming a colonial power structure, power itself within Europe, conquering a lot of Europe during World War II, right? So you go from being this very poor country to revolting and creating these private police forces and executing blitzkrieg, and then your leader kills himself, and after the rest of the world like kind of goes after you. And so at that point it was sort of realized that maybe it's worth it for Europeans to be allowed to inspect themselves as the subject of their own power, right? And these people had printing presses and writing in school, so they were ready to have this put forth through the mass production machine. The relationships were there. And so the understanding of colonial powers through the lens of this on the grounds colonizer colonize like mindset, like the idea that the meta would be demystified and become like historical canon didn't really happen until after World War II. And you sort of see like Europe having to rebuild itself after being completely destroyed in this war. And that's when you had thinkers like Memmi and Sartre and Kierkegaard kind of come up out of nowhere and start to be like, you know what, we live in a fucking prison, don't we? What the fuck is life? The old way is dead. We just saw millions of people, an entire culture, an entire religion like practically wiped off the face of this land. Like, what the hell just happened? God is dead, etc., etc. And so like what what we see today is that the language that unites the world on how to understand settler colonialism is based a lot on writing done during this post-World War II time period. And so you have Albert Memmi coming out of Tunisia. He was a Jew who was in a European colonized Tunisia that had eventually gone through a revolution and decolonized itself. So Memmi wasn't necessarily a guy who'd be accepted in Europe, but he also ended up not being a guy who'd be accepted in Tunisia anymore. And so he, because of historical forces, kind of happened to have this sort of like demystified, sort of like defetishized outsider point of view that is very conducive to understanding structures of power in this sort of structural way, in this sort of abstract way that sees it much less emotionally and much more sort of operationally, and kind of sees like structures of power operating on these emotions to accomplish whatever the goal of that structure is. These structures are often very messy. They're not like the factory machines that like you or I think of, or even like the computer code that you or I might think of as like being often abstracted or operationalized or kind of structurally analyzed in this way. Um, but they do accomplish similar goals, and people who make money off of these things repeat themselves and reinstitute these structures because they alone have the privilege to understand um, how this world can be rendered unto them. Um, that's how these structures of power, these these very systematized structures of power tend to work, because when you systematize power, you're creating remote controls, so you're allowing power to centralize, right? um Obviously, if you couldn't do that, things would just become more localized or complicated, right? It wouldn't be so easy to say, oh, let's do a structural analysis on this, because you'd need so many more experts and there'd be so much more material to go through. And you'd still have people arguing that this is actually the same as this, so I should be able to do this here. Um, which is just kind of a sick thing that's come from history. Um, so we're talking about colonizers, right? And we're talking about culture. So colonization, kind of what became accepted, and what became like the accepted, like connecting connective ideas that strong colonization together, is that you have image, right? So you have the image of the colonizer and the image of the colonized, and people take these images as myths and act them out, right? Because they're doing something, they're subjecting someone to like these contradictions and to these sort of unjustifiable power structures, these oppressive unjustifiable power structures. And if you understood how things worked, you might think to yourself that maybe you'd be like more like a John Maynard Keynes, and you'd be like, well, hey, or what is it, like a Nash, maybe like a Nash equilibrium guy, be like, hey, hold on, maybe if everyone cooperates, we can all get a bigger slice of the pie. People are subjected to these contradictions because their outrage makes them a viable subject of the law. So everyone's kind of separate, everyone's kind of separated, but the law institutes that people have access to this process that is greater than one person's understanding, right? And that's kind of how we've like organized society for so long. The colonizer doesn't arrive on colonial land from a lawless place, because these social contracts are very useful for introducing brand new people to the world, to each other, and getting them to trust each other, which is something you might have noticed. And so like, what do you call it? Like, basically, you have these mythical portraits that become these essentially like emotionally driven acts for people. And there's like a lot of language. There's like a lot of like thoughts about like the image and like how these things work. But how this relates to culture, right? Is you have these people acting in this way, but as like a colonial power, like how do you know like something is successful? How do you know you don't have to send over colonists from this area of town, or this area of town, or this sect, or this guild, or this community, or whatever it is? How do you know you don't need to move forces to like squeeze people out and introduce ideas to the public through your sneaky channels to like get people to go over as like colonists, right? How do you know you don't need to contact the church? How do you know you don't need to contact the printing guilds or whatever it is? Well, you have to have access to this new land as a market. You're always vying for access to territory. It's colonialism is about taking territory, right? So it's like we see a lot of colonial projects. Not all of them give a fuck about the people who are there. Some of them kind of want them gone. Some of them kind of just like exploit them until, you know, they're completely just like worn out and they act up and end up putting themselves in justifiably harm's way so that, you know, order is maintained, because you're always putting down people who look at society and think it doesn't make sense, right? Or maybe you're like, um, you're like this other colonial project where it's like, well, the natives are fine because we're, you know, we're letting them have sex and we're mixing with the natives because we already understand historically like how to render mixed people unto the powers that be, and you know we know how to adjust the notches just the right way so that we can be like, hey buddy, you know, you're a part of it, but you know, you're just this kind of part of it, right? Like, you know, maybe you're that kind of colonial power, or maybe you live in a digital age and you know, you have these like digital channels that you can reach people through that are just completely removed from the world, and so you have this digital image going out there creating spies for you, um, or you know, collecting like telemetric data so that you know like exactly like how much fuselage you need to have lodged into someone's home before they completely, you know, give up on wanting to live or something like that, you know, like uh like every colonial project's different, but the idea is that they want access to the territory. You know, maybe they want a security contract, maybe they want global trade, they want to be able to park their boats, and so they want to have like free access to like ports and natural resources. um Maybe they want the people to recreate society in the image that's given to them, so they censor like certain um notions of goodness and promote other notions of goodness based on like non-competitive agreements or something like that, like collusion or something, um like quiet collusion. So it's about access to territory. So, like I said, one of the biggest ways that you can access territory is to completely replace the culture. So, this is something that the Holy Roman Empire actually did in Europe way back when, back in the medieval age and the Dark Ages, is they would sever the next generation of any given place from the previous generation's notion of religion and use that uh, to have them, you know, render under unto the Holy Roman Empire, because their beliefs and their traditions that they would act out and understand would lend themselves to a logic that would have them side with the colonizers and accept their place under the HRE, right? Or in the in the English colonial project, they would have these people tussle with a bunch of British colonists, and eventually have them like buying like firearms to compete with like the arms race that was like present there at the time, and they would have them seek legitimacy under governments that were connected to like this global economy, and in order to survive, they would have their land completely depleted and become completely infertile, to the point where their survival was contingent on this interdependence with lingering colonial powers, like, you know, engaging in the fur trade, um, or you know, like what is it, like the bat? Is it Wounded Knee? It's like when they cut all those, you know, that scene from like Dances with Wolves where they have all the buffalo out there and they only cut the tongues out because they only want the tongues, you know, shit like that. So, you know, you do that and then you introduce like legal tender. And so now they have to have a way to buy like legal tender to like survive in the global economy. It's about access to territory, because like once they're into this like global economy in America, once someone's connected to like this global economy, they're subject to the interdependence that it institutes through like the destruction of land and the replacement of culture. And so, uh, yeah, that's why we all talk about consensus. That's why we all talk about like getting together and like trying to understand like how we can build sustainable lives with each other. Um, and why we seem to feel so like threatened by these outside media channels. But I mean, if you know what it is, then you should be able to talk about it, right? That you need an even larger consensus to begin to approach the type of reform that you need to sustain life without becoming subject to someone who's completely fresh and new to being some kind of rules enforcer, right? Someone who's completely fresh and new to being some kind of businessman. You know, you don't want societies falling off because some new guy shows up and no one knew how to teach them, right? Um, and so this is kind of like in the ballpark area of what like Hooks is saying here as Hooks. It gave her a language to understand settler colonialism. Um, and so that's why the next sort of the what is it? The natural progression of things is to ask, okay, well then what do you think of like white supremacist culture? What do you think what do you think of living in an America that doesn't understand itself as like a colonized colonizer, you know? Like what do you think of America as like something that's understood structurally so that people are like hard filtered from each other and each other's conversations based on like how far they want to put like draw a continuity. How do you feel about an America that persecutes people for like thinking too hard or whatever, right? That's kind of what she's like talking about here. And so now she's going to talk about Friere's focus on conscientization. Um let me get some water. Sorry. A structural analysis of colonialism hard filters people based on how far they extend the colonial structures operationally and like sort of in this mental simulacrum of the author's message that ends up only being like a shadow of like moments of human behavior. You know, it requires a lot of confidence. So okay, so we're gonna continue. Um, hold on, there's like one like little bit of egg jelly. Oh no, it's taro jelly. That's good. What was I doing? What was my voice for this one? Okay. Oh, absolutely. Because the colonizing forces are so powerful in this white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, it seems that black people are always having to renew a commitment to a decolonizing political process that should be fundamental to our lives and is not. And so Freire's work in its global understanding of liberation struggles always emphasizes that this is the important initial stage of transformation. That historical moment when one begins to think critically about the self and identity in relation to one's political circumstance. Again, this is one of the concepts in Freire's work, and in my own work, that is frequently misunderstood by readers in the United States. Many times people will say to me that I seem to be suggesting that it is enough for individuals to change how they think. And you see, even their use of the enough tells us something about the attitude they bring to this question. It has a patronizing sound, one that does not convey any heartfelt understanding of how a change in attitude can be significant for colonized, oppressed people. How do you say a parenthetical? What? Though not a completion of any transformative process. Again and again, Freire has had to determine what? Again and again, Freire has had to remind readers that he never spoke of conscientization, that he never spoke of conscientization as an end itself, but always as it is joined by meaningful praxis. In many different ways, Freire articulates this. I like when he talks about the necessity. I like when he talks about the necessity. I like when he talks about the necessity. I like when he talks about the necessity of verifying in praxis what we know in consciousness. My eyes are so watery that they're like falling closed. Hold on. Ooh, I hate it when it squeaks. Like I press my eye and it's like bubbles are coming out. Ugh. I have such a fucked up right eye. It's like not even funny. If you look at my face very closely, you see that it's like extremely asymmetrical. Like you ever see that game Enna? You know, that character Enna from Newgrounds? Like if you look close enough, like I very much look like that. I do not have a symmetric face whatsoever. That means, and let us emphasize it, that human beings do not get beyond the concrete situation, this condition in which they find themselves only by their consciousness or intentions, however good those intentions may be. The possibilities that I had for transcending the narrow limits of a 5x2 foot cell, in which I was locked after the April 64 coup d'etat, were not sufficient to change my condition as a prisoner. I was always in the cell, deprived of freedom, even if I could imagine the outside world. But on the other hand, the praxis is not a blind action, deprived of intention or of finality. It is action and reflection. Men and women are human beings because they are historically constituted as beings of praxis, and in the process they have become capable of transforming the world, of giving it meaning. I think that so many progressive political movements fail to have lasting impact in the United States precisely because there is not enough understanding of praxis. This is what touches me about Antonio Fon. This is what touches me about Antonio Foundes, asserting it, asserting in learning to question that. Holy fuck, my eyes are like not cooperating. Oh, give me 2 seconds. Oh, oh, holy fuck. Oh, oh man, that's where my eye muscles are. Oh. Deep, 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 deep down. All right. This is what touches me about Antonio Foundes, asserting and learning to question that. One of the things we learned in Chile. That's not what I said. One of the things we learned in Chile. That's not what I said. One of the things we learned in Chile in our early reflection on everyday life was that abstract political, religious, or moral statements did not take concrete shape in acts by individuals. We were revolutionized in the abstract, or we were revolutionaries in the abstract, not in our daily lives. It seems to me essential that in our individual lives, we should day to day live out what we affirm. Oh, it always astounds me when progressive people act as though it is somehow a naive moral position to believe that our lives must be a living example of our politics. There are many readers of Freire who feel that the sexist language in his work, which went unchanged even after the challenge of contemporary feminist movement and feminist critique, is a negative example. When you first read Freire, what was your response to the sexism of his language? I guess that's good enough for her. Let's see. Oh, didn't I say this? Didn't I say such a thing? Sorry, my arm hurts. Didn't I say such a thing? That these understandings that what people understand is, well, okay, so what Bell Hooks says is what people understand is compartmentalized, right? Like what people understand in school is like this function of sort of accepting this like unemotional sort of compartmentalized rendition of the knowledge that's being transmitted through like the types of teaching that are uh involved in the system today. So she advocates for this engaged learning where self-actualization is a process built into the learning. Something that kind of challenges the status quo in a lot of ways because of how exclusivity in schooling contributes so much to class division, right? And so we see, I made this brief statement during like my explanation of settler colonialism that essentially amounted to a critique of structuralism. It wasn't so much about settler colonialism, so maybe you forgot it, but I was saying how our understanding of settler colonialism is a structural analysis of settler colonialism, but sort of the problem of that as like a way of communicating with people is that Memi very much means to say that the line between colonizer and colonized is sort of this blurry barrier instead of this very like rigid sort of structural barrier, right? Um, you can't say that there's no overlap between the two, or that at any given time, like someone can be one or the other, or that one doesn't arise from the other situation, right? So we're talking about in America today, especially, is like these colonized colonizers, right? This like you can't have a chain of command if one does not render themselves to a higher colonial power. Um, and so that's an issue with structuralism. That's an issue of how we're understanding how these things work. So like structuralism, right? You're supposed to look at life. You're supposed to look at life and make these scientific observations about it, these academic scientific observations about it, right? You're supposed to use categories to abstract knowledge in this way that sort of demystifies it and allows it to be entered into like tables of data. Um, essentially, so that one day a computer can process life. So the idea is that anything that structuralism can't explain demands the account of an expert. So a lot of people like structuralism, and still like structuralism because it makes it so that the system is essentially fraudulent if it doesn't include experts. And what we know about human experience and like individuation is that um, eventually it gets to the point where anecdotal accounts of life are completely necessary for like an expert to understand life itself. So it on a surface, like in theory, like it shouldn't exclude the account of anyone. Um, and people should be the most important thing in structuralism, right? Which is why I think it was so enduring throughout the 20th century and even into the 21st century, right? Towards like the mid to late 20th century, like or towards like the late mid 20th century, people began seeing issues with structuralism. A lot of post-structural works kind of came out. Queer theory, for example, is very famous of sort of post-structural theory that looked at our structural understandings of gender and sex and essentially said that they're politically impotent, and that you can't have like a fight for the rights of human beings succeed on the terms on which they're negotiated, as long as we have like this sort of like these sort of liberal dysfunctions in government because of this structural analysis of like gender and like the sexes, right? um and so like it doesn't end there, but that's like one pretty prominent example, right? Is like queer theory. So like um when we're thinking of like what Freire is kind of getting at, and what he's talking about, his work, it seems to me that bell hooks would suggest that Freire was a bit of a post-structuralist writer, understanding that like the replication of these World War II like occupation of France conditions can't simply become like great thinking in other places in the world. Like you can't have like a movement based purely on image and expect these roles to be obviously mutated by that, because people are still operating on image. People are still consumers. They're still in this consumer brain mode where if they're given the image of something, they're going to act it out, and they're going to feel as though they got the bad end of a deal if it suddenly becomes that through their own actions they have destroyed their own role, because it's obviously very upsetting. And I don't know why it wouldn't be. It's destructive, but it's upsetting. It is upsetting. And so in these ways, like, our understanding of our own oppression kind of contributes to our impotency in being able to escape it, right? And so understanding post-structuralism and post-structuralist arguments becomes very important, because we have to learn to be flexible, like, on some level. And so part of that is, like, if you think about, you're the king again, right? And you're talking to the guilds, and you're talking to all these people who, maybe make print media, or, like, maybe you're not the king, but, like, you have a lot of connections in, like, TV and, like, the movie industry, and maybe you have a lot of connections in the streaming industry or something like that. And you are, like, this, like, new settler colonial, right? You oh man, you're Jesus, what a time to lose my train of thought when it's directly challenging something, you fucking piece of shit. Not like that's never happened. These roles. So we get back to this point where, like, people are controlled by image. I think that's what I was saying. And you're this guy who has to go out there and, like, control people through image, right? If it's, like, impossible to talk to you about contemporary social issues, or issues that you have, like, personal image based biases against, because you're ultimately this thrashing pawn in this fucking dry bed, you fucking freak. Like, oh my god. Like, you're never gonna accept anything I have to say. And so it becomes very difficult to teach people when these communities that understand the issue from the point of view of, like, maybe teacher and student can't reinscribe what they understand would be conducive to teaching people to self-actualize, right? To teach people to build up communities, right? And so it's a very contemporary issue, and I think by that virtue, there's sort of this defensiveness that people build up around these issues, that has more to do with one's lived experience, and less to do with understanding it as something a lot of people go through. So I almost feel like Gloria Watkins here in this dialogue is becoming defensive, because her work is about reaching out to people in this interpersonal way, and without having the ability to change the world materially, tap into people's ideas of emotional reciprocation in order to allow them to observe their surroundings, not only for what it could be, but for what it's doing to them. So I feel like that's why she's, like, beginning to address the sexist language here, because her strategy, what's been working for her, is sort of becoming the new authority. Like we talked about in the last video, she becomes the epoch, so that when people go back, they're going to her, right? And using that platform to create this, like, progressive counterculture sort of movement that allows people to take power back into their lives, to empower themselves, and to allow future generations to empower themselves. So this is her strategy. This is she's like, well, I recognize that, but I've made it my own, and that's something that people are prepared to accept from someone like her. That's something teachers are prepared to accept. Hold on. I need to take a quick break. 1 sec. I don't need my headphones. So this inability to reinscribe culture that is so contingent to uplifting people with these varied histories, or even to know what to reinscribe, is really putting an unfair burden on these instructors. And so that's enough. We've spoken enough on this, because we're talking to teachers. We're talking to people who have to deal with stupid kids all the time. And so we're kind of just going into it in a way that we understand. And so this is her personal strategy for becoming the true origin of man, a true authority on the nature of man, by placing herself at the beginning of time, so that if anyone were to render themselves onto historical forces, they must recognize bell hooks as an essential recursive element of all knowledge that's come after. Which you'd know about if you were around for when I was looking at Guy Du Board. But that was on Twitch, and Twitch is a terrible platform for this kind of thing. There are many readers of Freire who feel. Give me a sec. This guy's name Morse code. This guy's name is Morse code. I swear, if his name's Pussy, I'm gonna cry. I swear, if it's another guy named Pussy, I'm gonna cry. Is this like a real word? No. His name isn't Pussy, it's Cum. Okay. Alright. You got me. His name isn't Pussy, it's Cum. His name isn't Pussy, it's Cum. Look at this. Dream Drop Distance was so fucking disappointing. I was so ready, and Kingdom Hearts 3 by this virtue as well. The storytelling is so shot out the back in a fucking ditch. Like, oh my god. Like, I fucking, the Toy Story level in Kingdom Hearts 3 should have been amazing. It should have been like the greatest level in that entire game, and it just wasn't. They took a 3-act story and they turned it into a 1-act story. They built it up with Kingdom Hearts 2, and it's just, you couldn't, they built it up with Kingdom Hearts 2, and there's no Act 2 or 3 in Kingdom Hearts 3. There's not even, like, they gave us a DLC mega boss. What? Dude, that's so fucked up. Like, how could you do me like that? Such a slap in the face. Yeah, Dream Drop Distance was so disappointing, like in that aspect too, where it's just like, oh, there's no cutscenes, but you can look at the menus and you get to see what you would be experiencing. You get to see all these people you would meet if we weren't a bunch of deadbeats. God damn, dude. Look at this. Have you seen this? Oh yeah. Yep. Action. And then look, they drew it. That's awesome. It's so wrong, but it's like it's lovely. It's so lovely. Okay, anyways. When you first read Freire, what was your response to the sexism of his language? There has never been a moment when reading Freire that I have not remained aware of not only the sexism of the language, but the way he constructs a phallocentric paradigm of liberation. What? Yeah, no, I feel this way. Like other progressive third world political leaders, intellectuals, critical thinkers such as Fanon, Memmi, etc. It's how else are you supposed to get something past the publishers if you can't convince a bunch of sweaty fucking desk jockeys that like what you're writing isn't like some like revolutionary nonsense that causes them to reject the medium that they themselves are printing upon. Like, how do you get some revolutionary stuff, some hot shit past some dumbasses without making them blow up? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you do that as a woman, especially? You know, like, so the publishers are just the worst, man. Anyways, we're in phallocentric. What the penis? 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 Wherein freedom and experience of patriarchal manhood are always linked as though they are one and the same. For me, this is always a source of anguish, for it represents a blind spot in the vision of men who have profound insight. And yet, I never wish to see a critique of this blind spot overshadow anyone's, and feminists in particular, capacity to learn from the insights. This is why it is difficult for me to speak about sexism in Freire's work. It is difficult to find a language that offers a way to frame critique and yet maintain the recognition of all that is valued and respected in the work. It seems to me that the binary opposition that is so much embedded in Western thought and language makes it nearly impossible to project a complex response. Freire's sexism is indicated by the language in his early works, notwithstanding that there is so much that remains liberatory. There is no need to apologize for the sexism. Freire's own model of critical pedagogy invites a critical interrogation of the flaw in his work. But critical interrogation is not the same as dismissal. What the hell? Man, what a... I'm going crazy! I'm going crazy! I hate the dirty work. I hate it. I don't like the dirty work, dude. I wish people could just be straight with it, but like, I'd be doing this. I'd be doing this whole thing with another person, probably over Discord or something or Slack or whatever the fuck it is. Maybe we'd have a Zoom call. I'd be doing this with someone else right now. If I had someone that I could call up out of the blue, but I have like e-stalkers that are like possessive about their friends, and they make it impossible for me to have anyone I can just fucking casually hit up. And it's coming through now. Oh boy. You want to hear what she's saying? I I don't know, man. I want to lay down. Like, she's saying like she's like appealing to like people who they like, they like can't be criticized or whatever. It's she's doing something very dangerous. Like she's just like perpetuating the problem, but like assuming that she's too insignificant for it to be like a substantial like issue. But like the problem is that she just becomes image at some point. So she becomes just as potent as the image of anyone else. But the only way that she becomes like as bad of, in her mind, the only way she becomes as bad of a problem as anyone that she would criticize for doing this is if the power of their own image diminished to a point where her image could not hold the same power over people. So it completely ignores the possibility of a mass media culture based on complex computations, based on like one-to-one relationships between people's like personalization and the output of their content. She doesn't understand or maybe even believe that it's possible for a machine intelligence apparatus to have the ability to serve individually curated narratives that rend themselves unto the same kind of societal dysfunction that allows settler colonialism to operate freely, which is a huge oversight that if you read academics from like the 20th century, you're going to see them basically all make this mistake, or at least like recognize this like shortcoming. As you get closer to the 1990s, people start to understand like, okay, the computers are at home now. Okay, the computers are still at home. Okay, the computers are getting better. Okay, we're seeing pictures on the computers now. Okay, the pictures on the computers are being transmitted over the internet. All right. Maybe we underestimated it. Maybe. But she doesn't seem to care. Her audience doesn't seem to care. And it's just a horrible thing. It's just a horrible abusive thing that she's doing here to appeal to her audience. Man, that's I don't deserve this kind of treatment. Like yeah. And so she just kind of does this careless fucking thing, and it's like, yeah, actually the right people will see what you're saying, and it can still be weaponized and it can still be made personal and sent to the right psychographics and demographics to be potent enough to create enough division between people that they become politically impotent. And the thing that you attempted to that you bet would diminish never diminish. You bet that the power of this person's image would diminish, and it didn't. It just became more potent. that being said, people's ideas about this, well, I mean, what the fuck am I supposed to say today? Oh, people's ideas of information-driven surveillance state that can freely manipulate people's bodies are blown out of proportion, but there's a fucking, like, invisible, like, AI ghost, like, literally hacking people's bodies before cybernetics even exist. So, like, who's right? None of these people were right. Everyone underestimated it. There's still people making money knowing that people are underestimating it, fully aware that it's happening. People are profiting off of this kind of suffering. And I just, it's the kind of feeling where you're doing this and it's just, there's not enough resistance and you're not, everything's kind of samey and there's just not enough give in any particular direction, and it's like something should be happening right now, but it's not. And so yeah, so funny. More rage baiting in academia. Look, more rage baiting in academia. I don't think I don't like how women are allowed to be abusive. I don't like how abuse is kind of like, emotional abuse is just sort of like reinvented itself and become like completely permissible in mainstream culture. We gotta go back to that period of time, that brief period of time where people rejected emotional abuse and just kind of had to like trust each other. If we just like went there, instead of pivoting backwards to totalitarianism, we pushed forwards into some radical form of honesty and a departure from these oppressive ways of knowing each other, and just went out there and sued Facebook and Google, maybe the culture would change. Maybe something different would happen. You could just push through those freaks in legal, maybe. Yeah, let's see. Um, this is why it is difficult for me to speak. This is why it's difficult for me to speak about sexism from in Freire's work. It is difficult to find a language that offers a way to frame critique and yet maintain the recognition of all that is valued and respected in the work. It seems to me that the binary opposition that is so much embedded in Western thought and language makes it nearly impossible to project a complex response. Freire's sexism is indicated by the language in his early works, notwithstanding that there is so much that remains liberatory. There is no need to apologize for the sexism. Freire's own model of critical pedagogy invites a critical interrogation of this flaw in the work, but critical interrogation is not the same as dismissal. Yeah, and it's like there's there's this sort of like very analytical, sort of defetishized viewpoint on the issue of like being this oppressed person who like is like emotionally abused, right? And you know, there's like this nascent stage in like an adult community that exists in its prime, but also as a senior in its prime, you know, like a senior member of like that demographic, who does like probably at that point like understand like what's going on. There's this nascent period before that where people can be these like neoliberal deconstructionists and you know, genuinely prey upon people who are just like systematically like isolated and like bullied by like this sort of alienation that exists, and you know, come up to like recognize it themselves, and yeah, these people are abusive. I mean, you can't, there's no getting around it. Like these people are emotionally abusive, and you know, they like that power because it valorizes them for what they feel entitled to. At no point these people ever give up their entitlements to explore or interrogate any sort of uh new form, a new political form that presents itself to them, which is why they're always just these fucking floozies that, you know, act as some sort of like, you know, SS wannabe or like conservative wannabe or fucking gangster that like, you know, can't take no for an answer or whatever. Um, you know, like truly the fucking goon squad, the slug goon squad. Fucking snail trail goon squad. Where the fuck are my tissues? One sec. I'm in danger. I'm in danger. Look at me. I'm in danger. I'm gonna hurt myself. You see this blood? You've spilt it. I know you didn't mean to. I know you're not a destructive person. Or maybe I don't, but I know this works on you. No, but this is Gloria Watkins' time. Okay, this isn't my time. This is Gloria Watkins' time. This isn't my time. This is Gloria Watkins' time. What was I doing? What was I doing, Chris? So you see no contradiction in your valuing of Freire's work and your commitment to feminist scholarship. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Why can't you see a contradiction in it? Oh, asker of questions? It's because teachers can't give up authority. Teachers won't give up authority. It's a problem with teachers that she iterates over and over again. You know, these teachers don't want to give up authority, so they like these kinds of narratives where the person asking questions is made insignificant and abusable. Which is why every female pedophile you hear about in the news is a teacher. It fits too well into the sort of academic narrative surrounding issues of transcending class boundaries. In any reconstruction of history based on what's been reported, the connection will be drawn. It's a sick thing. It's also a tangent. Where's that? No one's talking about tangents anymore. That was a tangent. Oh, that was a tangent. No one's talking about tangents anymore. Don't you understand? You're giving all your information to Google. That's a fucking tangent. And don't tell me about my fucking volume. I know about my volume. You don't know shit about my volume. You're never going to be told about my volume. I'm the authority on my volume. Because the authority that subjected me to raising my voice like that, they're not going to fucking tell you. They're going to deny it every day of the fucking week. Fucking liars, liars, liars. When I wave my hands, I'm going to start reading. But right before I start reading, I'm going to wave my hands. I'm going to do this. Okay? So when I do this, it means I've started reading again. What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? Dude, what does this mean? What is why day 29, 500? What are you talking about? Why does he look like that? Why does he have latex gloves on, dude? Why does he look like that? He's so fucking... Is he short or not? Is like a taller guy just taking a picture of him? Why does Too Slimy look like that, dude? Dude, why does Too Slimy sound like that, dude? What the fuck? He feels like a parody of a person. Like, not any person in particular. I feel like they got a person. Like, they're like, this is a person. This is a human being. And, like, Like they're like, we got a human being here, parody a human being, and then they throw Too Slimy out. Like he's not. How is he real? Dude, what is Too Slimy, dude? Is he real? Is Too Slimy new? Do I not know enough? Is he a new guy? I know he's new, but is he like a new thing? Is Too Slimy a new thing, or is he a parody? Because I feel like you take a guy like that and you put him out into the world, and it's just like, this is a parody of the world. Like, have you seen a Too Slimy music video? They look insane. All right. Too Slimy 30-day calorie deficit 900 10,000. Oh, this one ends with a 1 on it. We really counted on that day. Or did we? Oh my god. What is Too Slimy? What the fuck is Too Slimy? Actually, I was really feeling it on that day. Alright. Anyways. Okay, so we're reading again. We're reading again. I'll wave my hands. I'll wave my hands a little longer so that the timeline picks it up. The timeline should be picking this up. Okay? We're gonna read again. What was I doing? What was I doing for this one? So you see no contradiction in your valuing of Freire's work and your commitment to feminist scholarship. It is feminist thinking that empowers me to engage in a constructive critique of Freire's work, which I needed so that as a young reader of his work, I did not passively absorb the worldview presented. That's pretty reasonable. And yet, there are many other standpoints from which I approach his work that enable me to experience its value, that make it possible for a work to touch me at the very core of my being. In talking with academic feminists, usually white women, who feel they must either dismiss or devalue the work of Freire because of, well, I guess sexism. I see clearly how our different responses are shaped by the standpoint that we bring to the work. I came to Freire thirsty, dying of thirst, in that way that the colonized, marginalized subject who is still unsure of how to break the hold of the status quo, who longs for change, is needy, is thirsty, and found in his work and the work of Malcolm X, Fanon, etc., a way to quench that thirst. To have work that promotes one's liberation is such a powerful gift that it does not matter so much if the gift is flawed. Think of the work as water that contains some dirt. Because you are thirsty, you are not too proud to extract the dirt and be nourished by the water. For me, this is an experience that corresponds very much to the way individuals of privilege respond to the use of water in the first world context. When you are privileged, living in one of the richest countries in the world, you can waste resources. And you can especially justify your disposal of something that you consider impure. Look at what most people do with water in this country. Many people purchase special water because they consider tap water unclean. And of course, this purchasing is a luxury. Even our ability to see the water that comes through the tap as unclean is itself informed by an imperialist consumer perspective. It is an expression of luxury and not just simply a response to the condition of the culture. If we approach drinking if we approach the drinking of water that comes from the tap of a global perspective, we would have to talk about it differently. We would have to consider what the vast majority of the people in the world who are thirsty must do to obtain water. Paulo's work has been living water for me. Paulo's work has been living water for me. Maybe that's why maybe that's why Bittersweet Candy Bowl goes on for so long. It really makes me wonder. You know, if you go to the Bittersweet Candy Bowl booth, her Australian boyfriend shows up. But no one else. Really makes you think. It's all the pieces are coming together. Mac batteries, Macintosh enthusiasm. You know, I'm actually really starting to get the furry webcomic Bittersweet Candy Bowl pretty well. And I would say it found me. If you haven't read Bittersweet Candy Bowl yet, you might never read Bittersweet Candy Bowl because you're better off reading this. But when I was in high school, oh man, let me tell you, I needed the heat. I needed that emotionally abusive heat because of my love for anime. My position in society as an outsider. Paulo's work has been living water for me. I think I talk about this a lot. I think I talk about this, how, like, this is the disparity of perceived intelligence. This is the disparity of perceived intelligence, right? Like, if we ban private institutions of schooling, the idea is that you're taking these things that are luxuries and making them widely available because it's not scarcity that defines their value, but their ability to consistently reproduce politically potent subjects, right? So you could tell everyone and teach everyone to be this way, to be these important people and to hold themselves in high esteem. But because of, you know, how education is tied into other market forces because of how the ontology of education is defined legislatively, you know, you see people sort of imprisoned in these schools and given a subpar education simply to prolong the status quo. And that I think is like a great injustice, you know, and maybe hooks can resonate with this. Oh, click the wrong thing. Maybe hooks can resonate with this. Yeah. No. Thank you though. I'm not hungry. I ate. My cameras are kind of off, aren't they? How did that happen? You know what I love is man, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about this. Anyways, yeah, so like I think bell hooks and I could agree on this. Oh shit. What if I just made these the same size? I think bell hooks and I could agree on this, that like there has to be this like flattening of like if there was a curve that represented like luxury, if there was like a line, a linear relationship between like availability of a good and its luxury value, for a good like education it should be flat, right? Like you should literally just be able to arbitrarily tell people these things and allow people to be changed by these things because they are valuable to society. Why Why does this have negative width? Oh, because I mirrored it. I don't know anything about OBS. Does this look weird to you? I don't think it's that weird. All right. And so yeah, like it's I get that from the metaphor. Um and people will just continue to abuse me because I believe in equality, which I don't appreciate whatsoever. I don't like this little fucking Playboy act that she puts on. I think it's gross. I think it's counterproductive. Okay. It looks like I fixed the cameras. Okay. Strange program. Such a strange program. I give this thing access to WebSockets. Maybe I should turn that off. No. It's disabled. Whatever. I think the USB is lying. The USB is lying. Okay. Alright, anyways. What the fuck is too slimy? I held that in for a while. Actually. How long is this chapter? Jesus. What? I have to do all the work? God. Jeez, the fucking wheeze. We're at the 2 hour mark. We're only halfway through. Have I been wasting that much time? Alright, anyways. To what extent... Sorry. To what extent... To what extent... Give me a second. Have I just been wasting that much time? Like, God. What was that? Okay. Whatever. To what extent... To what extent do you think your experience as an African American has made it possible for you to relate to Farideh's work? As I already suggested, growing up in a rural area in the agrarian South among black people who worked the land, I felt intimately linked to the discussion of peasant life in Freire's work and its relation to illiteracy. And its relationship to literacy. You know, there are no history books that really tell the story of how difficult the politics of everyday life was for black people in the racially segregated South, when so many folks did not read and were so often dependent on racist people to explain, to read, to write. And I was among a generation learning those skills with an accessibility to education that was still new. The emphasis on education as necessary for liberation that black people made in slavery and then on into Reconstruction informed our lives. And so Freire's emphasis on education as the practice of freedom made such immediate sense to me. Conscious of the need for literacy from girlhood, I took with me to the university memories of reading to folks, of writing for folks. I took with me memories of black teachers in the segregated school system who had been critical pedagogues, providing us liberatory paradigms. It was this early experience of a liberatory education in Booker T. Washington and Crispus Attucks, the black schools of my formative years, that made me forever dissatisfied with the education I received in predominantly white settings. And it was educators like Freire who affirmed the difficulties I had with the banking system of education, with an education that in no way addressed my social reality, were an important critique. What? And it was educators like Freire who affirmed that the difficulties I had with the banking system of education, with an education that in no way addressed my social reality, were an important critique. Returning to the discussion of feminism and sexism, I wanted to say that I felt myself included in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, one of the first Freire books I read, in a way that I never felt myself. In my experience as a rural black person, included in the first feminist books I read, works like The Feminine Mystique and Born Male, included. In the United States, we do not talk enough about the way in which class shapes our perspective on reality, since so many of the early feminist books really reflected a certain type of white bourgeois sensibility. This work did not touch many black women deeply, not because it did not recognize the common experiences women shared, but because those commonalities were mediated by profound not because we did not recognize the common experiences women shared, but because those commonalities were mediated by profound differences in our realities created by the politics of race and class. Really? Now there's something profound happening here, and I can tell because it's so banal. Cracked my back. It sounds really biographic. I don't think there's anything necessarily at play, but it's important to affirm that it has value because she as a person has value. If people felt more at liberty to share these sort of facts about themselves in this way that is amidst important information in this way, I think you'd see this division between like people who feel emboldened and empowered by like narratives and people who feel emboldened and empowered by these sort of like studies of aggregations of narratives would come to align in a mutual understanding of the importance of individual perspectives. But I'm not sure how an understanding of our relationships as colonizers and the colonized necessarily constructs this community of mutual understanding of importance, which is and has been a common theme throughout these books. It is one thing to understand the issue and another to understand how to leave this way of thinking. In a way, I would say one needs to be permitted to leave this way of thinking. I think if people want to experiment in sort of poignant ways in their lives, you have to ask people to do things that are seemingly worthless or unnecessary, but it's not enough to be like, do your most boring thing for me right now, because no one's going to understand why anyone's there or what to pull out of themselves. Bringing someone to that point without ever telling them what you're doing is disingenuous and breeds a sort of control over people that reproduces the quid pro quo relationships that we see today. So in a lot of ways, it's almost like you have to be lucky enough to meet people who feel as though they want to be honest. And then you have to understand society in that paradigm of like, you know, colonized and colonizer, or of like, you know, tech priest and influencer, or whatever it is. You have to understand these contemporary systems very intimately to understand how they actuate human behavior, and find within the gaps of understanding places where you can instate your own sort of bulwarks of free will in order to encourage people to manifest their ideas of freedom. Of course, you have to also have to be lucky enough to find people who want to be honest, and you have to be lucky enough to find people who still hold on to like that notion of like freedom within themselves. That is ultimately a constructive form of freedom, which in America at least like it forms very early on. That could be why we're always at odds with a place like China, because at least in the Confucius traditions, you have sort of like this ritualism that lends itself to changing one's habits to change one's mind, and everyone understanding this in sort of a salient way allows a cadre of thinkers to arise, a real a real force to be reckoned with in terms of parsing the absurd. But you also just to get there, you kind of have to operate on these terms that the colonizer would impose on you. So it's like scary to think that maybe you do have to find beautiful people to do this with. But like I think it is just that, like, if you think about people who are like spending their time, it's like what you really have to do is you have to go door to door, or like cold call people and be like, hey, do you want to do this ritual with me? Well, that's probably why cultists are kind of psyop the way they are in America. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe we can knock on people's doors and be like, hey, want to do this like new way of thinking with me. And that could be why drug culture sort of has this like historical grasp on like American culture, and like why experimentation has so much to do with like wrecking one's own body. And it doesn't end there, obviously, but I just I think about where these people are spending their time, and it's generally at home, with people that they've kind of decided to pair bond with, and it's really obstructive. These fucking gross romantics. All right, anyways, maybe there is a reason that I don't like the cuddle puddle mentality. Anyways, that's why femboys were fun. Femboys were already on the fringe of society, and then what did they do? They sent Nazis. The fucking internet forces sent Nazis after femboys so that my garden would be fucking trampled. Moving on. Let's have more fun reading. Let's do fun reading time. How is it doing this? Oh. Can you speak about the relationship between Pereira's work and the development of your work as feminist theorist and social critic? Unlike feminist thinkers, excuse me, the tongue really pressed against the roof of my mouth in this vertical way that is really disturbing. Unlike feminist Coach. Sorry, my stomach. Oh. Unlike feminist thinkers who make a clear separation between the work of feminist pedagogy and Freire's work and thought, for me, these two experiences converge. Deeply committed to feminist pedagogy, I find that, much like weaving a tapestry, I've taken threads of Paolo's work and woven it into that version of feminist pedagogy I believe my work as a writer and teacher embodies. Again, I want to assert that it was the intersection of Paolo's thought and the lived pedagogy of the many black teachers of my girlhood, most of them women who saw themselves as having a liberatory mission to educate us in a manner that would prepare us to effectively resist racism and white supremacy. That has had a profound impact on my thinking about the art and practice of teaching. And though these black women did not openly advocate feminism, if they even knew the word, the very fact that they insisted on academic excellence and open critical thought for young black females was an anti-sexist practice. I don't care. Hold on. Okay. It's banal, so there must be something we can draw from this. Can you tell that I've been gaming? I needed to stretch, so I used the beam that holds up my closet. Or actually, it's a frame. Anyways, right. Recognition's important, right? So, like, persuasively, she's attempting to recognize her roots as people recognize her. She's becoming culturally intelligible to reinforce her authority on the topic. But you're never just asserting your authority as someone who wants to revolutionize work, who wants to open up categories of work so that people who have historically been put under by that work have access to the sort of privileges that allow them to construct community, right? You can't just have someone take something from your hands as you're writing it, so to speak. So there's more at play here. And I think what she's doing lies somewhere around here. So she sets a very important precedent, which we'll come back to, and it's that she singles out lexically this notion of separation between feminism and Freire's work, because she wants to advocate for this form of engaged learning that keeps people from compartmentalizing what they learn in the classroom, so that teaching can be a liberatory action, since you're producing politically potent subjects. You're producing people who can approach the upper elite echelons of society, where the psychic abrasion of material wealth does not plague their thinking, right? So, like, she sets this important precedent that she wants to address, like, separation, right? And this is what makes her a great person, and maybe one day someone will want to be like her, but in the moment she just needs to be a cut above. because she's talking to teachers who recognize authority. Um, so she's kind of inviting a critique of what she's saying after she's like said that, you know, she doesn't want to feel critiqued in this way. And so in this way, it's sort of a concession. It's a very intelligent concession because it's something only teachers really understand, right? You know, this is something very contingent to the room and contingent to her strategy of working with educators, but she's making this concession that you know, that she is open to critique, right? Because she makes herself a target by becoming the authority in the room, right? So all these other authorities, to be an authority among authorities, you must accept critique from other authorities. That's how the world works. It's how peace works, I should say. Um, so she's making peace by essentially being this like target of people's critiques. And so in this in asserting her position, she's creating the sort of psychic terrain that people will approach once they get to this point where they need to establish themselves as someone recognized as an authority before this authority, right? Because we're always looking for recognition from authorities, which is such a sad thing that consumers go through, but it is, you know. If you're a consumer, you've gone through these psychic abrasions, you're seeking recognition from the authorities to live. Um that's not having privilege, you know. Um that's why so many of these like rich fuckers just act it out with no consequences and then say that they're like you and then never get into anything else, or like, you know, scream at you when you try to get at them for, you know, being different or whatever. um and never throwing out the cash, you know, maybe having like a few friends instead of trying to make a difference in society. These fucking dirt sniffing fucking snout nosed bitches would rather pull other people down by creating these fucking networks of uh defamement and libel because they're a bunch of sick things. um Anyways, so she's like saying who she owes it to, and she establishes her point. She wants to resist racism and white supremacy. She talks about how it has an impact on her learning because she's talking to people who have issues with recognizing these things in their own classrooms. Maybe it's a math teacher who's like, you know, just trying to do things according to how school policy is written, right? Without really questioning when that school policy is written and who's enforcing it. You know, just little things like that. Um, she's like, well, not everyone knew feminism, but they could recognize it, which is, you know, she's still peacemaking. Even if people don't want to critique her, they might say, you know, I'm different than you. You know, we stand at two different points in this continuity. Um, you know, when will you recognize me? You know, she's playing on this idea that people want to be recognized. Um, and I mean, she's so well known. You know, on some level, it had to be effective. Otherwise, her work wouldn't be so withstanding, right? And maybe this is one of the weaker points of her work, though, because I feel like a Gen Z audience like resists this like intensely. They also resist going to school in the first place, so maybe I'm just like wrong about who I'm talking about. But there are a lot of people who resist this kind of thing or fold to this kind of thing immediately. You know, she's really making another one of those bets about people that is just not gonna help her, that like anyone in the audience could be someone who wants to, you know, step up to the plate and change things, and that's all she needs, you know. I don't think she's the best, but I understand what she's doing. Like, maybe it worked somewhat at some point, but as far as her work goes, it got her published and it gave her her own school. Um, which is certainly a start. Uh, but we're here in 2026 and it's going down. So while this is all very entertaining and interesting, I still think it's very self-serving. But let's continue, because we're still getting there's still some meat on these bones. There's some meat on these bones. We're gonna have meetings about these bones. There's still some meat on these bones. We're not gonna have any meetings right now. Not about this. That's too specific. Anyways, be more specific about the work you have done that has been influenced by free area. Yeah, that's fair. Why don't you tell us more? They're teachers. They're used to this kind of questioning. Tell us more. Prove us that you know what you're talking about. Prove to us that you know what you're talking about. Let me say that let me say that I wrote I Ain't a Black Woman in Feminism when I was an undergraduate, though it was not published until years later. This book was the concrete manifestation of my struggle with the question of moving from object to subject, the very question Paolo had posed. And it was so easy. Now that many, if not most, feminist scholars are willing to recognize the impact of race and class as factors that shape female identity. For everyone to forget that early on, feminist movement was not a location that welcomed the radical struggle of black women to theorize our subjectivity. Friere's work, and that of many other teachers, affirm my right as a subject in resistance to define my reality. It's not really how I wanted to say it. Friere's work affirm my right as a subject in resistance to define my reality. His writing gave me a way to practice. Oh my god. Can my eyes work? Can my body not be assaulted? Love it if I wasn't being assaulted right now. His writing gave me a way to place the politics of racism in the United States in a global context, wherein I could see my fate linked with that of colonized black people wherever struggling, wherever, hello? Everywhere struggling to decolonize, to transform society. More than in the work of many white bourgeois feminist thinkers, there was always in Paula's work recognition of the subject position of those most disenfranchised. Hold on. My head is like, I'm fighting my fucking eyes more than I'm reading what I'm looking at. Ugh. Freire's work affirmed my right as a subject in resistance to define my reality. His writing gave me. Need to look at this. His writing gave me a way to place the politics of racism in the United States in a global context, wherein I could see my fate linked with that of colonized black people everywhere, struggling to decolonize, to transform society. More than in the work of many white bourgeois feminist thinkers, there was always in Paulo's work recognition of the subject position of those most disenfranchised, those who suffer the gravest weight of oppressive forces, with the exception of his not acknowledging always the specific gendered realities of oppression and exploitation. How? This was a standpoint which affirmed my own desire to work from a lived understanding of the lives of poor black women. Excuse me. There has been only in recent years a body of scholarship in the United States that does not look at the lives of black people through a bourgeois lens, a fundamentally radical scholarship that suggests that indeed the experience of black people, black females, might tell us more about the experience of women in general than simply an analysis that looks first, foremost, and always at those women who reside in privileged locations. One of the reasons that Paulo's book, Pedagogy and Process, The Letters to Guinea-Bissau, has been important for my work is that it is a crucial example of how a privileged critical thinker approaches sharing knowledge and resources with those who are in need. Here's Paulo at one of those insightful moments. He writes, "Authentic help means that all who are involved help each other mutually grow, mutually growing together in the common effort to understand the reality which they seek to transform. Only through such praxis, in which those who help and those who are being helped help each other simultaneously, can the act of helping become free from the distortion in which the helper dominates the helped. In American society, where the intellectual, and specifically the black intellectual, is often assimilated and betrayed revolutionary concerns in the interest of maintaining class power, it is crucial and necessary for insurgent black intellectuals to have an ethics of struggle that informs our relationship to those black people who have not had access to ways of knowing shared in locations of privilege, because they'll kill them. You need and people can't just be anywhere always whenever they need to be, right? That's a privilege. The division of learning in these information technologies shows us time and time again that one of the most valuable things you can be is that little voice in someone's ear telling them to doubt anyone before them. Just kind of a scary prospect, right? Because you're thinking about going up against like the most prolific thing on earth, right? And so you might think, well, if that's what change is contingent on, is competing with something like that, then it must be over. And it's just not true. Omnipotence and prevalence are just not nearly as linked as people believe, because people fail to see that dysfunction is kind of at the core of any sort of delta of potency represented by the powers that be. If we're talking about like relative power level, Batman with prep time always beats Superman because he has a weakness, kryptonite, right? If we're talking about the relative power level of the average American citizen, the average citizen of the world, and the average executive of the world, it's simply a disparity in education, in placement in this mythological hierarchy that defines people's mental engagement with the subject. If people believed that knowledge could save them, it would be an entirely different story when our daily practices come under scrutiny by people who want to advocate for themselves. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is a lot of people are seeing their satisfying way of life criticized by people who spend too much time
doing what they believe is nothing. When in fact these people actually have to go off of nothing and create communities in these spaces where the powers that be are hostile towards the creation of these communities. These are people resisting out here in a desert of intelligibility, creating themselves and making themselves unique individuals, despite not being necessarily accepted by like mainstream culture or having like access to like any of these like venues that exist, which is why, on some level you have to wonder if this mainstream recognition is like poison to these movements and communities. um but that's just one of those fucked up paradoxes that keeps these people fragmented and separated from one another. It's obviously getting worse, but it was good for a while. And what it really demonstrated is that with even just a bit more advocacy for oneself, one can significantly stand out in a field of elites as the common person, as someone who can viably create society. So any of these altruists that exist that manage to get by on their own merit, notice these people, then you can shift power in a way that's significant. So it's difficult to bring this one vision of the world to the other vision of the world, on the terms that it is like difficult to like quit drinking coffee, or that it's like difficult to start exercising. It's just, you got to do that footwork. You got to do those cold calls. You got to knock on people's doors, and you have to have at least a decent presentation of oneself. And I'll leave presentation at that. Yeah, interesting. There's more to this, but I really want to move on because I don't want this video to be longer than 3 hours to explain every friggin' line of this. So let's keep going. So we understand. So she's explained her position on Freire. She's satisfied that sort of insecurity in herself that she feels resonates with others' insecurities, and ideally, she's convinced herself, and and by that virtue, can understand why people may or may not be convinced by what she's saying. And so moving on. Comment, if you will, on Freire's willingness to be critiqued, especially for feminist thinkers, because that's who she's trying to talk to. In the absence of feminist thinkers, this is what she is thinking of feminist thinkers. But she knows it doesn't work. So why is it that this inner dialogue seemed to contradict her praxis? It's a complicated question, but I think it's better off accepted than understood at this juncture. In so much of Paulo's work, there is a generous spirit, a quality of open-mindedness that I feel is often missing from intellectual and academic arenas in U.S. society, and feminist circles have not been an exception. Of course, Paulo seems to grow more open as he ages. I too feel myself more strongly committed to a practice of open-mindedness, a willingness to engage critique as I age, and I think the way we experience more profoundly the growing fascism in the world, even in so-called liberal circles, reminds us that our lives, our work must be an example. In Freire's work in the last few years, there are many responses to the critique made of his writing. And there is that lovely critique exchange between him and Antonio Foundes in Learning to Question, on the question of language, on Paulo's work in Guinea-Bissau. I learned from this example from seeing his willingness to struggle non-defensively in print, naming shortcomings of insight, changes in thought, new critical reflections. What was it like for you to interact personally with Paulo Freire? That so this is kind of an impotent victory. I mean, it's like it's just saying I know. You know, it's the kind of thing that you don't necessarily whip out if you're talking to people. This is where the work goes, this is where you talk to people and engage with people and hope that at some point you've provoked some kind of critical response from your audience that can build them up as you build yourself up, because we live in this world of like pseudo valorization. It's a concession to the dialogues we can't have. Maybe this is good. Maybe this is a productive way of putting things. Maybe this is better in print than it is in conversation, but we're talking about a dialogue here. So it's not necessarily going to reflect reality. This is like when you're goldfishing a Magic deck, you're playing Magic the Gathering by yourself. At this point, it's like you start shuffling up the cards because you're like, well, now I need real life. Now I need people to show up, But yeah, so just, this is her just kind of going on. Let's see what she says. What was it like for you to interact personally with Paulo Freire? For me, our meeting was incredible. It made me a devoted student and comrade of Paulo's for life. Let me tell you this story. Some years ago now, Paulo was invited to the University of Santa Cruz, where I was then a student and teacher. He came to do workshops with the third world students and faculty and to give a public lecture. I had not heard even a whisper that he was coming, though many folks knew how much his work meant to me. Then, somehow, I found out he was coming not only to be told that all the slots were filled for Then somehow I found out that he was coming only to be told that all the slots were filled for participants in the workshop. I protested, and in the ensuing dialogue, I was told that I had not been invited to the various meetings for fear that I would disrupt the discussion of more important issues by raising feminist critiques. Even though I was allowed to participate when someone dropped out at the last minute, my heart was heavy because already I felt that there had been a sexist attempt to control my voice, to control the encounter. So, of course, this created a war within myself, because indeed, I did want to interrogate Paulo Freire personally about the sexism in his work. And so, with courtesy, I forged ahead at the meeting. Immediately, individuals spoke out against me, raising these questions and devalued their importance. Paulo intervened to say that these questions were crucial, and he addressed them. Truthfully, I loved him at this moment for exemplifying by his actions the principles of his work. So much could have been changed for me had he tried to silence or belittle a feminist critique. And it was not enough for me that he owned his sexism. I wanted to know why he had not seen that this aspect of earlier work be changed. He responded to in writing by him, and he spoke then about making more of a public effort to speak and write on these issues. This has been evident in his later work. Dad. If you know, you know. That's Xavier Renegade Angel. Were you more affected by his presence than his work? Another great teacher of mine, even though we have not met, is the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. He said in The Raft That Is Not the Shore that great human beings, with them something like a hollowed atmosphere, and when we seek them out, Great humans bring with them something like a hollowed atmosphere, and when we seek them out, then we feel peace, we feel love, we feel courage. His words appropriately defined what it was like for me to be in the presence of Paulo. I spend hours alone with him, talking, listening to music, eating ice cream at my favorite cafe. Seriously, Thich Nhat Hanh teaches that a certain milieu is born at the same time as a great teacher. And he says, when you, the teacher, come and stay 1 hour with us, you bring that milieu. It is as though you bring a candle into the room. The candle is there. There is a kind of light zone you bring in. When a sage is there and you sit near him, you feel the light. You feel peace. The lesson I learned from witnessing Paulo embodied the practice he describes in theory was profound. It entered me in a way that writing can never touch one, and it gave me courage. It has not been easy for me to do the work I do and reside in the academy. Later, I think it has become almost impossible, but one is inspired to persevere by the witness of others. Friere's presence inspired me, and it was not only that I did not see sexist behavior on his part, only that these contradictions are embraced as part of the learning process, part of what one struggles to change, and that struggle is often protracted.
Have you anything more to say about Friere's response to feminist critique?
I think it is important and significant that despite feminist critiques of his work, which are often harsh, Paulo recognizes that he must play a role in feminist movements. This he declares in Learning the Question. If the women are critical, they have to accept our contribution as men, as well as the workers have to accept our contribution as intellectuals, because it is a duty and right that I have to participate in the transformation of society. Then, if the women must have the main responsibility in their struggle, they have to know that their struggle also belongs to us, that is, to men who don't accept the machista position in the world. The same is true of racism. As an apparent white man, because I always say that I am not quite sure of my whiteness, the question is to know if I am really against racism in a radical way. If I am, then I have a duty and a right to fight with black people against racism.
Does Freire continue to influence your work? There is not the constant mention of him in your latest work, as was the case with the first books.
Though I may not quote Freire as much, he still teaches me. When I read Learning the Question, just at a time when I had begun to engage in critical reflections on black people in exile, there was so much about the experience of exile that helped me. And I was thrilled with the book. It had a quality of that dialogue that is a true gesture of love that Paulo speaks about in other works.
What?
So it was from... I've talked about this. So it was from reading this book that I decided that it would be useful to do a dialogical work with the philosopher Cornel West. We have what Paulo calls a talking book, Breaking Bread. Of course, my great wish is to do such a book with Paulo. And then for some time, I have been working on essays on death and dying, particularly African American ways of dying. Then, just quite serendipitously, I was searching for an epigraph of his work and came across these lovely passages from Paulo that echo so intimately my own worldview that was as though, to use my own southern phrase, God damn it. That was as though, to use an old southern phrase, my tongue was in my friend's mouth. Love. He writes, I like to live my life intensely. I am the type of person who loves his life passionately. Of course, someday I will die, but I have the impression that when I die, I will die as intensely as well. I will die experimenting with myself intensely for this for for this reason, I am going to die with an immense longing for life, since this is the way I've been living. Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you saying those very words. Any last comments?
Only that words seem to be not good enough to evoke all that I have learned from Paulo. Our meeting had that quality of sweetness that lingers, that lasts for a lifetime. Even if you never speak to the person again, see their face, you can always return in your heart to that moment when you were told to be renewed. That is a profound solidarity. Yeah, that's what exile, solitude, is like this psychologically warping thing that makes it impossible for you to create community, right? Which is why maybe it's so hard to, in part why it's so hard to talk about creating community, is because you're actually talking about the synthesis of ideas and unique points of view. Unique points of view, unique experiences come together to synthesize community. So community reproduces itself when it can reproduce this method of intaking so many unique experiences and synthesizing them into action that reconstructs the community and reproduces this idea of community itself. That is why institutions of learning are so essential to any sort of liberatory action, because in this sort of compartmentalized consumer world, we understand the academy as the place where knowledge can be transmitted platonically beyond bounds of genealogy, of hierarchy, of religious study. And maybe that's what drives people in part away from it, but it's also why it's so important as like this locus of progress in society, because in this compartmentalization, in a way, people have to set aside these biases. But we all see that the best come from these communities where this compartmentalization gives way as life is lived, and these lessons are applied time and time again. Because that's mental practice. People aren't compartmentalizing when they can know these things off the top of their head, because they've been taught from the beginning that their life and what they learn are linked and can be linked in this harmonious way. Really great chapter. I thought it was funny at times, but also, very hurtful at times. Man, it's almost too much for me to express in any other way than dialogue, right? Well, anyways, this video's long. And I don't think I effed around nearly as much as I did last time, so whatever. It's a long one. Thank you. Thank you for listening.